I never imagined that a 2-minute phone call could change the rest of my life. It was a typical Tuesday, and the sun had barely begun to caress the plants on my windowsill when my son, Alex, called. My only son. I recognized immediately that anxious tone in his voice, the one he always adopted when he needed something. "Mom, could you send me like $500 this week? Olivia broke her phone and says she can't study without it." I feigned surprise, though I was used to this routine. "Of course, Alex. I'll transfer it before noon," I replied without hesitation. That was always how it went. But when he ended the call, he didn't hang up fully. I heard the click, that strange pause indicating the line was still open. Then I heard Olivia's laugh, light and mocking, followed by Alex's voice. The same voice that once soothed my nights, but now cut me to the bone. "I told you it was easy. She's so gullible she still thinks we miss her. ATM mommy, unlimited withdrawal," he jeered, drawing more laughter. My grandson, Liam, joined in without hesitation. "Just make up any excuse," and she opens her purse. The old lady lives to feel useful. The three of them laughed together. The three of them. The phone was still pressed to my ear as I felt my heart collapse slowly, like a sugar cube dissolving in hot water. I sat motionless for a long moment, in the chair that once belonged to my husband, Daniel. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from a coldness rising from my stomach to my fingertips. How could they think I would stay silent? I stood slowly, as if afraid to wake a nest of snakes. I walked to the living room shelf where I kept my bottles of medicinal herbs, each labeled in my own handwriting: chamomile, mint, linden. I grabbed one at random, hoping to calm my nerves. I couldn't. The infuser dropped to the floor with an empty clink, exactly how I felt inside. I've lived in this house for over 30 years. Every piece of furniture, every stain on the carpet, carries a memory. Alex learned to walk using this sofa. Olivia used to put on her makeup in my bathroom before job interviews, and Liam spent entire summers here. Now, I walked to my desk and pulled out a folder stuffed with receipts and bank statements. The last check had been sent 4 days ago for supposed urgent school expenses. Emergencies, they called them. And I finally realized that the only emergency was never me. Before I continue my story, please share below if you've ever experienced something similar. Your perspective matters to me, and together we can help others see that they are not alone. I let myself fall into the old armchair by the window. The sun was now high, shining as always, but nothing felt the same. I didn't cry then. Not yet. Tears would come later, like a rude guest arriving unannounced. I was neither just an open wallet nor an ATM, though I had become exactly that in the eyes of those I loved most. There was a time when my home rang with laughter. The smell of melting butter filled the kitchen on Saturday mornings, and the sound of Alex's feet racing down the hallway was my favorite soundtrack. I was the neighborhood school librarian, the one who read stories in funny voices and knitted sweaters for the teachers' babies. The children called me Miss Linda. I knew every name, every quirk. I was loved, respected. I had a purpose. And even after Daniel died, when everything fell apart for a while, I never stopped being useful. Alex was 6 when I took him with me every day to the library. He would sit in the reading corner with his little books and wait for me until my shift ended. At 7, he told me he wanted to be an aerospace engineer. At 8, he memorized the world capitals. He was a sweet boy, full of dreams, and I did everything to nurture them. Every week I hid notes in his lunchbox. "You make me proud. Never doubt yourself." And when he got pneumonia at 13, I slept for 2 weeks in a hospital armchair, reading each chapter of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer to him. After Daniel passed away from a sudden heart attack at 44, I took on everything alone. A librarian's salary, a mortgage that stole my sleep, and a teenage son who needed me more than ever. I took a second job as a night archivist at the Central Library. I slept little, lived on coffee and hope. When it was time for college, I sold my engagement ring, the white gold one with a blue sapphire that Daniel's grandmother brought from Scotland. Alex never knew. He only saw the tuition paid and a smiling mother at the dorm door. When he met Olivia, I welcomed her like family. I baked a peach pie and treated her like a daughter. She said her mother was too critical, and that with me she felt at home. Foolishly, I was moved by every word. When Liam was born, I took extended leave just to help. I changed diapers, made baby food, tended to fevers, sang lullabies. How many times did I skip my own doctor's appointments because of one? Of his colds? How many nights did I decorate cupcakes for Olivia's school functions when she said she was too exhausted? And when they wanted to buy the house, the bank wouldn't approve the loan. So I refinanced mine. $40,000. We'll pay you back in less than a year, Mom. It's just a little boost. I never saw a dime of that money again. Not a cent. Not a thank you. Yet I kept telling myself, it's family, Linda, because we give without expecting anything, right? Except that giving without expecting is not the same as erasing yourself. I often sat alone in the kitchen, those blue tiles Daniel chose, wondering where everything began to change. Maybe it was when Olivia stopped inviting me to birthdays and started sending only gift lists by message. Or when Liam, at 14, corrected me with contempt. It's not Nintendo, Grandma. It's Switch. You don't get anything. My heart still clung to hope, but my body already knew the truth. I felt it in my arthritic hands, cooking dinners that no one sat down to eat. I felt it in my back, carrying groceries while they walked in without so much as a glance. I was mother, grandmother, caretaker, the mortar between the cracks. But now I realize I was always the only one trying to hold it all together. The house became too silent. Some mornings I heard only the tick-tick-tick of the wall clock Daniel gave me on our 15th anniversary. Each second resonated like a drop of all I no longer had. Last month I turned 74. Alex didn't call. Liam didn't either. Olivia sent a message. Happy birthday. No news. Like sending a receipt. Even so, I sent them birthday cards. Each card had a $20 bill inside. Sometimes I still cook like before, out of habit. Last week I made a lemon cake and brought it to their house, still warm, wrapped lovingly in a linen cloth. At the gate, I found a note. We're not here. Leave it in the mailbox. In the mailbox. Not even leave the cake. Or thank you for the visit. It was as if anything I brought was irrelevant. Or worse, predictable. I left the cake. I never knew if they ate it. They never returned the pan. I came home empty-handed as always. I was just a shadow who brings food and leaves. A grandmother who sends money as if that could buy affection. That day, sitting alone at the kitchen table, I realized what I'd been refusing to see for so long. I spent years trying to buy love with checks. Every Sunday I wore my best blouse and waited for their visit like someone waiting for a miracle. Now I dressed out of obligation, for a possibility that never materialized. Helen, my neighbor, saw me from her garden. Sometimes she waved with her coffee cup. I used to respond with a timid smile, hiding my teeth, not out of shame for the loneliness, but for having fed it with excuses. I have a photo album on the living room table, always open to the same page. Liam's first day of school. Me, crouched beside him, hands on his shoulders. He was 5, carrying a dinosaur lunchbox, and he cried when he walked into the classroom. I sat in the hallway all day on a wooden bench, waiting for him to want to come out. Today, when I send a message, he responds with an emoji, if he responds at all. Silence taught me what routine hid. The exact moment you stop asking, why don't they call me? And start asking, why do I still call? I got used to having lunch alone. Sometimes I lay out 2 forks, as if that act could summon company. It doesn't work, but it soothes me. My nights are long. I sit on the sofa with a cup of chamomile tea, the same that helped me sleep since Daniel's time. I like to spin my wedding ring on my finger. It's loose, not from weight loss, but from loss itself. Love, when it cools, shrinks too. In a drawer of the bookshelf, I keep old drawings by Liam, still marked by crayon. One says, Grandma, I love you to the sun. Now he doesn't even reply. For a long time I thought if I gave more, they would stay. But I learned that boundless generosity teaches others to leave without guilt. The first cracks were always there. I just didn't want to see them. A harsh word, an indifferent glance, an unexplained absence. One day Alex called urgently. Mom, can you send just $200 today? It's for Olivia's school. And without thinking, I said yes. Not because I hadn't noticed something was wrong, but because my impulse was always the same, to fix things. That night, by accident, I opened a voice. Message forwarded by Olivia. Say it's for Liam's school. She'll believe it. I listened 3 times. 3, and I said nothing. I still thought, maybe it's a misunderstanding. That word, maybe, cost me thousands of dollars over the years. Another day, standing in line at the bank, I saw a transfer request on the app. $50 for dinner with friends, sent by Liam. I smiled. thinking how sweet it was that he thought of me. I asked how the dinner was. I got no reply. I called. He answered, curtly, "Grandma, it's just dinner. Why does everything have to be so serious with you?" And he hung up before I could say anything. Another time, Olivia called me crying. Her mother was ill. They couldn't afford a caregiver. Despite all the hurt, I helped. I transferred what I could. 2 weeks later, I saw the three of them at a fancy restaurant on Instagram. Liam held a sushi platter larger than his head. The caption read, "My queen deserves the best. War night out gratitude." It took me days to summon the courage to ask Alex if Olivia's mother was better. He didn't take his eyes off the television. "Oh, she's fine, Mom. Don't worry." As if I were a source of money who needs no justification, only new requests. I began to keep notes, not of amounts, which were already in online banking, but of their behaviors. Every excuse, every disdain, every promise unfulfilled. Alex no longer called to share news. He called only when a bill was overdue. Olivia avoided looking at me at family gatherings. Liam hadn't sent me a message since last Christmas, except for demands. And me? I stayed there, with my little notebook, with my faith, listing every wound as if I still believed in fairy tales. Helen, my neighbor, is the quiet type, but she always hits the mark. One day, while we pruned the rose bushes together, she set down her shears, wiped her hands on her apron, and said, "Linda, if every time someone comes to you it's to ask for something, when was the last time someone asked how you are?" I was speechless. That question hammered in my mind for days. The evidence was there, always had been. But it's easier to cling to hope than admit we're being used. Easier to believe there's affection behind the interest than face the raw truth. But something in me was starting to change. I was no longer the woman who begged for attention with cookies. I was beginning to see, and what I saw hurt. The day of Liam's graduation dawned with birdsong, as always. I got up early, made strong. Coffee, checked the cake box for the 5th time. Red velvet with cream cheese frosting and fresh strawberries. His favorite. I had baked that cake for every birthday, but this one was special. His high school graduation. I drove 2 hours, stopped at a cafe for the restroom, inspected the cake at every bump in the road as if I carried a crown. I arrived 20 minutes before the ceremony began. The sun was bright, and I regretted wearing a sweater. I looked for names on the guest list. His name was there. Mine wasn't. "You can sit there, ma'am," said the receptionist, pointing to the back of the auditorium, the last row. From there I could barely see the top of the graduates' caps. But I stayed, because that's what grandmothers do. They stay. After the ceremony, I watched the students leaving, laughing and hugging. I held the cake as if it were a sacred offering. I saw Liam with his friends, snapping drone photos. When I approached, he looked surprised. "Grandma, we didn't know you. We're coming." Olivia was beside him. She forced a smile but didn't bother hiding her discomfort. "You weren't on the list," she said, as if that justified everything. "It's okay," I murmured. "I brought something for you." I handed over the cake. Liam took it with one hand. "Oh, thanks." He turned away to rejoin his friends when I put my other hand on his shoulder. "This is for you too." I gave him a white envelope. Inside was a check for $1,000. To start this new chapter, worry-free my heart. He held it for a second, said, "Thanks, Grandma," as if asking for the salt at the table. Olivia quickly grabbed the envelope with a firm motion. "We'll deposit it in his account today." And that was it. No photo with me, no dinner invitation. No, "Let's talk." Just a hollow thanks, and their backs walking away. I stood there by a trash bin in the parking lot. I saw other grandparents receiving hugs, posing with bouquets, taking selfies. And me? I had an empty cake pan in my hands and the echo of the coldest thanks I'd ever heard. I drove home in silence. No radio, no notifications, no calls. Just the hum of the car and the whisper inside me, which had changed pitch. Before it said, "Hold on, Linda, they're just busy." But that night it said, "This isn't love, this is use." I got home and went straight to the shower, still wearing my clothes. The hot water didn't melt the ice around my heart. I sat on the bed with my wedding ring in my hand, the one Daniel gave me, that first spring together, the one I wore at every Sunday dinner, and I realized what I felt was no longer sadness. It was indignation. That night I took out my phone and checked my call history. There it was. Alex, 4:17 a.m. Duration, 2 minutes. I replayed the recording. I sat in the armchair and listened again. She believed it, Alex said between laughs. Olivia gave a sharp nasal laugh. The poor thing thinks she still matters. And Liam chimed in. The old lady gets emotional over anything. We say we love her and she signs a check. I replayed it 3 times. Each time it hurt more, but it was pain that needed to surface, because sometimes a wound must reach its depth before it can begin to heal. The 4th time, Olivia was still saying, just smile and sign the envelope. Easier than asking for a loan. Alex agreed. Just use the right tone. She falls for it every time. My jaw clenched. My arthritic thumb throbbed as never before. Not from wear, but from fury. What was I? To them? Mother? Grandmother? No. I was an ATM with a sweet voice. I closed my eyes and let shame slice through me like a knife. Not because I was used, but because I let myself be used. Because I taught them my love didn't require return, that my generosity was an obligation. I remained there, motionless, staring at my reflection in the living room window. I no longer saw the woman who baked heart-shaped cookies, nor the one who hid notes in lunchboxes or sold her ring for love. I saw an invisible woman within her own family, a woman who needed to wake up. I stood with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I went to the office, opened the bottom drawer, and took out the blue folder where I'd kept all the transfer receipts, check stubs, gift receipts, all those numbers that seemed forgotten but were alive, pulsing. $75,432 in 8 years, almost $10,000 a year, over $800 a month. That was what I'd given, a monthly rent. And entire retirement, a lifetime. And what did I get in return? No thanks. No real remembrance. I placed the folder on the desk next to the photo of Liam in his graduation gown. I stared at it for a few seconds, then turned the frame face down. I didn't want to see that fake smile again. Not after what I'd heard. The recording was still saved on my phone. I could forward it. I could confront them with proof, with shouts, with rage. But I realized I didn't need that. I didn't need empty apologies or new lies. I just needed to step out of that role, to climb down from the pedestal I'd built for them. Because this wasn't about revenge. It was about rescuing myself. The next morning, I rose as usual. Lemon tea, newspaper, the same cotton robe. But something inside me had shifted into place, finally fitting. I walked to the hallway closet. Inside, in a forgotten corner, lay Daniel's old ledger. He'd never stopped using it, even after retirement. I opened to a blank page and, in large black, letters wrote, last check, date, amount, payee, disloyalty. I snapped the book shut, a full stop. Then I opened the family chat, the one with cheesy memes, gift lists, and good morning automatics. I tapped Leave Group. The system asked if I was sure. I smiled. I'd never been more sure. Next, I opened the bank app. I had 2 joint accounts, one with Alex, another that Olivia used to facilitate transfers. I closed both. I scheduled a meeting with my manager and went in person. I asked him to revoke any authorization that wasn't exclusively mine. I activated notifications for every transaction, added passwords, extra keys. When he asked if I wanted to name beneficiaries, I replied firmly, not yet. First, I need to clean house. I cut off the oxygen supply to the system that had exploited me for almost a decade. Back home, I entered the guest room, the one I'd once decorated with care for when Liam stayed over. Now, there was just a rumpled bedspread and a box of old magazines. I opened the box. Inside was a framed photo of Alex and me, flour-covered and laughing in the kitchen. For a moment, I thought about keeping it. But no, I put it in a brown paper bag with some books they never returned. I took it to their porch and left it there without ringing the bell. No note. They no longer deserved my words. I returned home and, for the first time in a long while, cooked just for myself. Not a dinner loaded with expectations. Not a cake waiting for gratitude. I made lentil soup and fresh cornbread. Simple. Warm. Mine. I sat in the armchair with my crossword puzzle book and ate with trembling hands, but each spoonful tasted like freedom. For the first time in years, I went to sleep without placing my phone on the bedside table, because that night, I didn't expect calls, and more importantly, I didn't need them. I woke before sunrise as always, but I wasn't at home. The lamp beside me glowed soft yellow. the kind that makes anything seem less sad. The blanket was rough but clean, and the air smelled of disinfectant. It was a roadside motel. Nothing luxurious, but sufficient. I'd left home without warning, locked everything up, packed 2 outfits in a suitcase, and set off with no destination. I only knew I didn't want to be anywhere I'd always been used. At night, before turning out the light, I cried. A low, thick sob, the kind that slides out when you can't maintain the facade any longer. Was it all a lie? That question whirled in my mind like a broken propeller. I found myself recalling Christmases, birthdays, the days I wrapped presents with golden ribbons, imagining that maybe this would be the year they'd truly see how much I loved them. I thought of all the times I waited behind the curtain, watching their car round the corner, and when they were late, because they always were, I still smiled and rushed to the kitchen, pretending it didn't matter, that the important thing was, they came. But now, in that hard motel bed, clutching a scarf I knitted for Liam in an old winter, I understood. The problem was never their absence. It was how I decorated that absence with excuses. I didn't sleep well. I woke up stiff, as if the mattress had sucked away my youth. I went down to the lobby and made coffee from those plastic machines. Strong, bitter, unsweetened. I took my notebook. Daniel taught me that when your head is full, writing releases the pressure. I wrote, Alex asked me for money for the first time when Liam was 3. Olivia asked me to pay for kindergarten. I refinanced the house in 2015, and I filled page after page with dates, amounts, justifications. It was a chronology of my own surrender, a diary of how a mother gave away her old age in silent installments. At the end, I did the math. $75,432.19. The number didn't hurt me. What hurt was what it symbolized. The price of my dignity, the cost of repeated hope, the exact amount they were willing to take without ever loving me. I sat by the window, watching cars pass, and thought, this ends here, because if a mother doesn't protect herself from those who claim to love her, who will? I returned home 2 days later, not out of longing, not for reconciliation, but because I needed to see everything one last time with new eyes, and what I found was clarity. I entered and felt the familiar silence of the living room, but for the first time, that silence didn't hurt me. It wasn't loneliness. It was freedom. I took off my shoes, laid my keys on the center of the table, and went to the office. I grabbed the folder of important documents. I organized all the papers, receipts, contracts, unkept promises, and the little lies told with smiles. Plane tickets for dates they didn't remember, payments for non-existent therapy sessions, laptops, camps, uniforms, even professional photo shoots for Liam's graduation album. Everything I paid for without ever asking for anything in return. I opened online banking. The numbers spoke to me like never before. Dates, amounts, descriptions. It was a museum of abuse disguised as generosity. There were transfers made on Fridays and Saturday photos on Instagram with new sneakers. There were $200 every month for 5 years for therapy that I discovered never happened. A clear pattern emerged on the screen. They asked. I solved. When they didn't ask, they lied. And worst of all, I taught them this. Every time I silently agreed. I wasn't just a victim. I was complicit in my own exploitation. Every time I smiled and said, sure, dear. Every time I agreed to avoid seeming bitter. Every time I offered cake instead of confrontation. I confirmed that my worth lay in what I could give, never in who I was. And then I truly understood. It wasn't just that I had been forgotten. I had been turned into a function, into a utility. And when a woman becomes a function within her own family, she disappears. I rose from the chair. I took my mother's hand mirror, the old one with a worn wooden handle, and looked at myself for a long time. Linda, I said softly, this is not sadness. It's awakening. It was no longer about revenge or making them feel guilt. It was about me, about reclaiming what I thought I had lost, my own value. Because giving for love is one thing. Giving out of fear of being forgotten, that's imprisonment. And I had served that sentence long enough. The next morning, Helen arrived. Unannounced, as she always did when she sensed something was wrong, bringing a pot of barley soup with vegetables, wrapped in a checkered cloth smelling of dried bay leaves and nostalgia. I made too much, she said, as if she didn't know I hadn't cooked in days. She made me sit and serve the bowls, like in the old days, when we took turns caring for each other's children. She didn't ask anything at first. She just looked into my eyes with that calm of someone who'd seen me shattered more than once. She waited until I took the first sip. "How long has it been since you cried in front of someone?" Helen's question came gentle, almost a whisper. I tried to answer, but my spoon trembled in my fingers. The steam from the soup mingled with the lump rising in my throat. I drew a deep breath, and then I let it out. "I heard them, Helen. I heard all three, Alex, Olivia, and Liam, laughing, calling me an ATM, saying I just have to smile and sign." She didn't look shocked. She didn't frown. She simply nodded slowly, as if confirming a suspicion she already knew. "I always told you, Linda, but knowing is different from hearing." I rested my elbows on the table and buried my face in my hands. I felt her wrinkled fingers touch my wrist, her thumb tracing slow circles, just as she used to do when her children had fevers. A small gesture, but it was an anchor. "I thought it was love," I confessed, my voice hoarse from old pain. Helen sighed. "Of course you did, dear. Because you know how to love. You always knew how." I told her everything. Every transfer, every lie, the graduation cake, the folder of documents, the final amount, the 75,000. Helen didn't interrupt once. She just listened with the patience of someone who'd watched her friend come apart over decades. When I finished, she handed me a napkin and said firmly, "You are not crazy. You are not exaggerating. You are, for the first time, seeing everything with open eyes." Her words struck me like both a slap and an embrace at once, because they were true. I wasn't losing my family. I was losing the fantasy that I ever really had one. That night, I slept with the phone off. Helen left a flashlight by the bed in case the power went out, and a packet of salty crackers, in case you wake up with nausea from too much truth. I slept without anxiety, without waiting, without excuse, because now I knew. I wasn't alone. I was just very badly accompanied. The next morning, I went straight to the safe where I kept my important documents. Inside, beside wedding photos, my librarian diploma, the hospital bracelet from Liam's birth, was the will. The one Daniel and I made more than a decade ago, still hoping Alex would one day care for what was mine. I opened the paper and stared at his name as sole heir. I felt sick. To care for what? I thought. To keep draining me till the end? I took a red pen and wrote one word in the margin. Null. The following morning, I went to the law firm where Daniel and I drafted our first will. The receptionist greeted me with that smile that said, "We haven't seen you in years." I asked to speak with someone about a new will, not for when time allows, but now. I was attended by a young lawyer with her hair tied back and steady eyes. I told her everything. No pauses, no tears. When I finished, she asked, "Do you already know who you want to leave your estate to?" I smiled, surprised at my own answer. "Not to my son." I took a deep breath. My husband died of stress. My grandson forgot me, but the library of my life still has leaks. The lawyer was silent for a moment, then smiled back. "Then let's create something that will endure." And that's how the Tomas Fernandez Scholarship Fund was born, a fund for young women without means who wish to complete their studies. My name will not appear in the announcements. There's no need. But at the bottom of every acceptance letter, a line will read, "Thanks to a woman who believed in books and second chances." For the first time, my money will serve something real, something that no one will have to lie to receive. I left there with a light heart. I went to the bank. I asked to freeze all the joint accounts. I canceled the linked cards. I opened a new account, just mine, at another branch. The manager looked at me with raised eyebrows. "All at once like this, Mrs. Linda?" I adjusted the strap of my purse on my shoulder and replied firmly, "I got used to granting permission without knowing to whom. That ends now." I showed him the list of the latest suspicious transactions. "Do you know what this is?" I asked. "It's the sound of a woman waking up." That night I sat at the kitchen table with a blank sheet of paper. Not to send it, just to read aloud and then burn. I wrote, "Alex, I am no longer the mother who says yes out of fear of being alone. You taught me my worth by putting me on clearance. Olivia, you were never my daughter. Liam, you were my son. But even the sun can cast a shadow if not cared for. From now on, the door is closed. Not with a lock, with dignity. I burned the letter in the bottom of the sink. The ashes went down the drain, along with years of swallowed silence. I had a plan, and for the first time, I was included in it. 3 days later, the phone began to ring. First, it was Alex. The number was different, maybe a new SIM card or a borrowed phone, but the voice was the same. "Mom, I got a bank notification. Access denied. Account closed. Must be a mistake. Call me." "Okay?" I did not answer, because all the mistakes, I'd already made them. Then came Olivia. A voice message, her voice shaky, feigning tremor. "Linda, we're really sorry. It was a misunderstood joke. You know how it is. We love you. Please respond." I stared at the phone while I spun my wedding ring on my finger. I remembered when Olivia called me the best mother-in-law in the world, the same woman who left me sitting in the last row at the graduation. Then came a message from Liam. Simple. "Grandma, what's happening? Dad and Mom are acting weird. I just want to know if you're okay." That one hurt the most. For a moment, my fingers hovered over the keyboard. I was one keystroke away from replying, "I'm fine, sweetheart." But I didn't, because I would only be fine if I didn't repeat the cycle. And Liam was no longer a child. If his love depended on what I deposited, then it wasn't love. It was habit. And habits, like wills, can be changed. The next night, Helen appeared with a bottle of cider to celebrate the fact that you didn't give them the satisfaction of an explanation, she said, raising a plastic cup. We laughed as we hadn't in years. We served hot soup, did crossword puzzles past midnight. When Helen said goodbye, I stared at the closed door, and for the first time, I didn't feel loneliness. I felt peace. The fourth day was different. The doorbell rang twice, and a voice I knew well sounded from outside. "Mom, I know you're in there. I just want to talk." It was Alex. I looked through the peephole. He was there, hair tousled, like when he was a child waking from a nap. But I didn't open the door. I leaned back against it, silent. "I know about the will, and that scholarship fund. Are you really going to give everything to strangers?" That's what he chose to say. Not, "I miss you." Not, "I was wrong." Just strangers. Little did he know that those young women who would receive scholarships would be more mine than he ever was, because they never asked me for anything, and yet I chose to give everything. The fifth day brought a deep silence. No messages, no calls, and that's when I realized they let me go. Or perhaps, and more likely, I was the one who let go first. And in that newfound emptiness, I began to hear a song I hadn't heard in decades, my own inner voice. 3 months passed. No messages. No, "We need to talk." At first, the emptiness burned like a wound. Then it became space. Clear. Light. I used that time to do everything I'd been postponing for years. I painted the garden gate, replaced the guest room curtains, learned to bake bread without a machine. And every night before bed, I wrote in my journal one sentence. I didn't regret it today either, until one Saturday morning, I saw a car parked in front of my house. I recognized the plates. I heard 3 light knocks on the door. I took a deep breath. I smoothed my blouse and opened it. It was Alex. He looked thinner, with deep dark circles under his eyes and drooped shoulders, but his eyes still held that wounded pride. "Mom." The sound of my own motherhood in his voice no longer hurt me as before. It only reminded me of who I had been, and who I would no longer be. We stood there for a moment, me on the threshold, him outside, separated by just 1 step. "I didn't come to fight," he said, his voice lower than usual. I just want to understand." I said nothing. I waited. He averted his gaze, uncomfortable. "Did you really cut everything off? Like, at your own family?" I took a deep breath, lifted my chin, and faced him calmly. "And you didn't cut me off when you decided I was only worth what I could give?" He opened his mouth but had no answer. It was quick, as he always was when cornered. "It was a mistake. A joke. We didn't know you were still in line." I folded my arms. "Oh, of course. If you hadn't heard me, everything would still be the same. I'd still be writing checks and bringing cakes." Alex swallowed hard. "I just want things to go back to how they were." I tilted my head slightly. "Before you called me an ATM? Before the lies, the excuses, the laughter behind my back?" He threw up his hands in frustration. "You're my mother. You have to understand we were stressed." And then I said, with a calm coldness I never thought I could muster, And you have to understand, Alex, that I'm not for sale. Silence fell between us like a thick curtain. He took a deep breath as if he expected that, at the end of that sentence, I would hug him, as if I would run to the kitchen, make hot soup, and tell him everything would be okay. But I did none of that. I learned something. I continued. Sometimes the only way to stop bleeding is to close the door. He placed a hand on the door frame, almost begging. Mom, but I had already decided. You taught me what love was, Alex. And you also taught me how much it was worth to you. Thank you for that lesson. I closed the door with a soft click. No scandal, no tears, just the precise sound of a cycle ended. I pressed my forehead to the cool wood and exhaled the breath I'd been holding for days. It wasn't happiness, nor pride. It was dignity. And that no one could ever take from me again. I walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of cider, and sat on the porch. Helen, in the garden beside me, watched. Was it today? She asked with a nod. I nodded. And how do you feel? She continued. I thought for a second before answering. Whole. The following days were quiet, but it was a chosen, clean silence. I began taking short hikes, rediscovered my love for crossword puzzles, and joined the library's reading club. A group of ladies meets every Friday to read, laugh, and have tea. They welcomed me as if I'd never left. There, it didn't matter how much I had in the bank, or how many children I'd raised. What mattered was who I was. Linda, lover of books, handmade sweaters, and peaceful afternoons. At one of those meetings, a young woman approached me. She had dark eyes and a shy expression. Are you the one behind the Tomas Fernandez scholarship? I hesitated, then smiled. Yes. She squeezed my hand. Thank you. I'm finishing my history degree because of it. I felt tears well up, not of sadness, but of something new, something I thought I'd lost forever. Purpose. The kind of gratitude that comes without strings attached, without demands, without manipulation. For the first time in many years, I realized my generosity could have a destination and meaning. That night, returning home, I made myself dinner, potato leek soup and fresh homemade bread. I lit a candle, not for luxury, but out of self-care. I sat at the table and wrote in my journal. Today, no one asked me for anything. Today I existed for myself, and that is enough. Then I turned off the living room light, set my cup in the sink, and walked to the bedroom on light feet, like someone who, finally, no longer carries the weight of others on her shoulders. Months passed with a lightness I hadn't felt in ages. No one called asking for money. No one knocked on my door with an emergency. And, contrary to what I imagined, it didn't hurt. It was liberating. Because there, I understood something fundamental. True love isn't lost when you stop paying for it. What is lost is the pretense, the illusion that if you're generous enough, you will finally be seen. I was seen, yes. By who matters? By myself. Sometimes I still think of Liam, not with anger, but with a kind of longing that no longer tries to return. I keep one of his drawings on the living room shelf, the crayon one that says, "Grandma, I love you to the sun." I never tore it up, because back then perhaps it was true. And if it was, even for a short time, that's enough for me. But I no longer expect emojis or messages or apologies. What needed to be said, I heard. And what needed to be done, I did. Today, my life fits within my own measure. No excess, no waste. The other day, Helen invited me for a walk in the park. Cold wind made the leaves dance, and tall branches filtered the evening light like the stained glass of a living cathedral. We sat on a wooden bench, and she asked me, "Do you still miss them?" I thought a moment before replying, "I do, but not their presence. I miss who I was when I believed that loving was enough to be loved in return." She squeezed my hand. "But now you know that sometimes loving also means leaving. And leaving can simply mean closing the door without guilt, canceling an account, turning off a phone, not replying to a message. Not because you've become unkind, but because you've finally decided to be fair to yourself. I had to hear the cruelest truth to see myself with compassion. And today I understand. Whoever doesn't learn to protect herself from those who claim to love her ends up losing herself in their love. And that truly is the greatest loneliness there is. The old house where it all happened is still mine. It still has the sofa where Alex learned to walk, the blue tiles Daniel chose, the clock that goes tick, tick, tick every morning. But now everything sounds different. Time no longer weighs as it once did. Silence no longer frightens me. It is the sound of my new life. And even if the walls still echo an unjust past, I fill every room with my own choices, with small rituals of care, with record player music, with the scent of hot bread and brewed coffee. Recently, I took up letter writing again. Not to them, but to myself. Little notes. Leave stuck on the refrigerator, the mirror, the nightstand. You are enough. Don't confuse silence with absence. Not all love needs applause. Sometimes we need to be the voice that comforts, the hand that caresses, the hug that restores. And the truth is, after years of giving everything to others, I finally began to give myself all that I have always deserved. If you've read this far, you may have felt a bit of what I lived. Perhaps you're going through something similar, wondering if it's an exaggeration, if you're being selfish, if you should give one more chance. I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you what I learned. Loving others shouldn't cost you your wholeness. And if it does, maybe it's time to step back, take a breath, close the door with dignity, not anger or shout, but self-love. Today, as I write these words, the kettle whistles. Night falls slowly, and for the first time in a long while, I don't feel like I'm waiting for anyone. I'm just here, with myself, whole, serene, my freedom steaming in the cup, my true story finally beginning the right way. The following week, I reopened the back porch. It had been locked for years. The plants were withered, the pots cracked, but the sun still shone on that corner. I started slowly, sweeping leaves, cleaning window ledges, polishing the old wooden bench where Daniel used to take tea in the late afternoons. I didn't do it expecting visitors or praise. I did it because that place was part of me, and I no longer wanted to live in ignored parts. I hung a wind chime from the upper beam. Each time it rings, I remember that I'm here, whole and present. I also began tending the front plants again. Neighbors would pass by and say, "Looks lovely, Linda." And for the first time, the compliment didn't feel like social obligation. I smiled, because I heard it with a clean heart, because now I plant for myself, water for myself, prune, because I enjoy watching growth. It was in that process I realized much of what I did for years, I did hoping to be noticed. And when you give expecting love in return, any silence becomes a knife. Today, I plant because I love shade, because I love green, because I love myself. I also started donating things that had sat idle in the house. Liam's crib, which I'd kept for years thinking someone would come for it. The toys Olivia said she'd pick up next month. The boxes of Alex's old clothes. One by one, I took them to a teen mom shelter with a note inside. May this new beginning be filled with true love. The receptionist's eyes glistened with gratitude, and in that moment, I understood that perhaps what was missing wasn't being loved by my family. It was loving with freedom, without imprisonment. I inherited my mother's sewing machine, tucked away in the laundry closet. I began using it again, making new pillowcases, refurbishing cushions, even sewing myself a skirt. Helen said I was the lightest version of myself she'd ever seen. "There's something in your eyes now," she remarked one day, "as if you've said goodbye to a weight that made you stoop." And, in a way, that's exactly what happened. I bid farewell to an expectation that kept me kneeling, and now every stitch I make mends me as well. Over time, I began receiving letters from the young women awarded the Tomas Fernandez Scholarship. Each envelope was a reminder that I could transform without erasing myself. One of them, Nina, wrote, "I wish my grandmother had lived long enough to see my diploma. Somehow I feel you are her." I read that with a lump in my throat. I had never received so many genuine words written to me, and none of them demanded anything in return. Just sincere, untainted gratitude. Linda. One cold afternoon, I decided to visit Daniel's grave. I brought fresh flowers, gently scrubbed the headstone with a soft brush, and sat on the nearby bench with a blanket around my shoulders. "Would you see me now, Daniel?" I whispered. I finally learned to say no. I stayed there almost an hour. The cemetery silence wasn't frightening. It was dignified. Each falling leaf seemed a reminder. Time passes, but what we choose to do with it leaves its mark. I placed a folded note among the flowers. "Thank you for teaching me to love. Now I'm learning to love myself." And there, on that chilly October afternoon, I made peace with time. I no longer blamed myself for the years I gave. I did not shame myself for the signed checks or the cakes left on doorsteps. All of it was part of the journey to this point. And now that I am here, with free hands and a clear conscience, I understand what rebuilding truly means. Not pretending nothing happened, but accepting that it all happened, and still moving forward. On a clear night, I sat alone in the backyard and gazed at the stars. My cup of tea warmed my hands, and the breeze carried the soft scent of the lavenders I replanted. There was no music, no television, no notifications vying for attention. There was only me, whole and silent. I realized that true loneliness was never being alone. It was being surrounded by people who made me feel invisible. And now that this silence was mine, chosen, it no longer hurt. It was comforting, like a coat that only someone who's stopped explaining herself can wear. A few days later, I received a handwritten letter from Liam. The envelope was plain, the handwriting hesitant. "Grandma, I want to apologize. I knew what they did to you was wrong, but I stayed silent. I let it happen." He told me he'd started working at a cafe, and every time he got a tip from an older lady, he thought of me. "I'm not asking for money. I just wanted to tell you I remember when you made me cupcakes, and I miss it." I read it without tears. No sadness, but with a mature ache. A pain that no longer bleeds. A longing that no longer paralyzes me. I didn't reply. At least, not yet. Because some wounds shouldn't be covered up hastily. Some truths need to ripen on their own. On the other side, tuck the letter in my nightstand drawer. Perhaps one day I will write back. Perhaps not. And that's okay. Because now I understand that forgiveness is a gift you first give yourself. Not to forget what was done, but to remember what you've decided never to allow again. The next Sunday, I went to the market alone. I chose fruits at leisure, chatted with the plant vendor, bought a new wicker basket. When I got home, I made myself brunch. Fresh juice, toast with artisanal jam, scrambled eggs with herbs from my garden. I set the table for one, but with everything I would have prepared for any guest. Because in that moment, I was my own guest of honor. After lunch, I sat with Helen in the garden. She watched me for a moment and said, "You look different." "Better or worse?" I asked. "More you," she replied. And perhaps that is the greatest compliment one can receive after years of living for others. To return to being oneself, or to discover for the first time who has always been there, quietly waiting for the courage to emerge. That night, I calmly closed all the windows, lit lavender incense, took a long bath, and put on my soft cotton pajamas. Before lying down, I wrote in my journal, "Today, the house is at peace, and so am I." I turned off the light, set my phone to silent, and rolled onto my side. The pillow smelled of freshly laundered sheets, and the sheets themselves, for the first time in ages, were not rumpled by nights of insomnia. Sleep came quickly, and lightly, without ghosts of the past haunting my dreams, without anxious waits for a message, a call, or an explanation. I slept whole. I woke, renewed, and when I opened the window that morning, I felt a cycle had ended, not because the pain disappeared, but because finally, it no longer ruled me. And so, with light steps and a steady soul, I continue, undaunted, unresentful, but with the certainty that I deserve more than scraps. I deserve presence. I deserve truth. And above all, I deserve peace. The same peace I built, brick by brick. Every time I said no, every time I didn't answer, every time I chose myself. And if you're reading this and feel that moment has come for you, I say to you, from my whole heart, close the door. Not in anger, but with dignity. Because dignity, my dear, is priceless.